السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأصلي وأسلم على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما نافعا. آمين. In the previous sessions, we engaged in a selected reading of a very early Islamic text in moral philosophy or metaethics by the great Imam Thabit ibn Sinan, rahimahullah, who was a court physician of the Abbasid Khulafa. The text we read is called Tahdhib al-Akhlaq, and it is yet to be published. We read from the original manuscript, and this is a very early text in Islamic metaethical theory. Al-Imam Thabit ibn Sinan, rahimahullah, he died in 365 after Hijrah. So this is 3rd and 4th century after Hijrah. And we understood the differences, at least the main basic differences between the Islamic ethical philosophy and the Western moral philosophy from the selected reading of this text. Our moral philosophy is based on objective principles and foundations from which religion, Islam, is the main pillar. In the West, religion slowly and gradually took a backseat. The only religious experience they were exposed to was Christianity, which came with its own problems. And the Western ethical theory is not so comprehensive as Islamic ethical theory. It is reductionist. Islamic ethical theory takes into consideration the complex nature of the human being, both body and soul, and the intricacies of the nafs, the soul, and many other matters which we discussed while we were reading from this text. The purpose was not to understand Islamic morality with its details. This is a field in itself. It needs separate engagement. The only purpose was to understand the main differences and the principles of Islamic morality from this text. That's why we took some selected paragraphs here and there in order to appreciate the holistic and comprehensive nature, both in theory, principles, and methodology of our scholars, the great geniuses we have produced, and overall Islamic worldview and the moral philosophy. While we were reading, we engaged in a brief comparison. We did not go into the details because this was not our primary concern. We engaged in brief comparison with the Western ethical philosophy. And in that, we looked at the main Western ethical theories like moral relativism, moral nihilism, consequentialism, utilitarianism, contractualism, shedding a brief light on the main ethical philosophers in the West. The purpose was to understand our own legacy. And sometimes we cannot appreciate our legacy except by engaging in the comparison with the dominant civilization. So we took from briefly from the Western moral philosophy discussions. And now, inshallah, we are in the concluding sessions of this component, ethics. And inshallah, we will conclude it in 1 or 2 sessions, and then we move to another component of the Islamic worldview. So in this engagement and discussion, our purpose was to understand the 2 important issues in moral theory. Number 1, whether there can be any objective basis for our judgments of the right and wrong. This is called meta-ethical. Yani this question or this issue is meta-ethical. Whether there can be any objective basis for our judgment of right and wrong, or objectivity in morality. And number 2, whether there is any credible theory that can determine what we ought to do. Do we have a comprehensive and meta theory which can determine our morality, which can give us the foundation for what we ought to do as human beings? We can call it moral theory. These are the 2 important issues, or we can say these are the conclusions of our discussions, particularly in the Western moral philosophy. And we can safely claim that the Western moral philosophers are not able to give satisfactory answers or complete, comprehensive solutions to these 2 questions. They have great contributions. Some theories are practical and beneficial to understand the moral philosophy, but we cannot understand the holistic and comprehensive principle or foundation for morality of a human being from the West, except one theory, which is called the virtue theory attributed to Aristotle. According to my humble understanding, this is the nearest theory to Islamic ethical philosophy. This is called virtue theory. Claimed by the famous philosopher Aristotle. We discussed the contemporary moral theories of the Western philosophers. And this is a very early theory given by a philosopher who lived in a time which is considered the foundational age for the Western civilization. This theory is the nearest, but it also does not cover the comprehensive nature of the Islamic metaethics or Islamic moral philosophy. For this reason, we can see that the Muslim scholars, they engaged in explanation of this theory. The texts which they compiled in ethics, they took it from Aristotle. They took the content with changes and explanations, rejections and acceptance, but the core, they took it from Aristotle. The famous example is the treatise of Al-Imam Al-Iji in Akhlaq. It is a mukhtasar. It is a brief treatise by Al-Imam Al-Iji, who was a famous philosopher and mutakallim, theologian. He compiled it to understand the moral philosophy. And scholars have written commentaries and explanations on this text, like the famous explanation of the Turkish scholar Al-Imam Tash Kubrizada. His commentary on Risalatul Akhlaq, the treatise on Akhlaq, is very deep and profound. And there are other commentaries. If you reflect on this text, Risalatul Akhlaq of Al-Imam Al-Iji, you will see the core has been taken from the virtue theory of Aristotle. And we know our scholars in the translation movement, which was initiated by the Abbasid Khulafa, particularly Al-Ma'mun, how they engaged in understanding the legacy of the West, the Greek civilization, and they translated the important works into Arabic with additions and their own contributions, which eventually paved the way for Western Renaissance. And this is not a claim anymore. This is a very established fact, accepted by the modern Western thinkers also. This is very famous, particularly the works of Aristotle. And the Muslim scholars, they gave him the title of the first master in knowledge. And there are particular Muslim philosophers and scholars who dedicated themselves to the explanation of the works of Aristotle, like Al-Imam Ibn Rushd. He's very famous. When Al-Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, compiled the critique of philosophers, particularly those who championed the cause of Aristotelian philosophy, and they wrote commentaries like Al-Farabi and others. And Imam Al-Ghazali compiled this critique against these Muslim philosophers, and which he called Tahafatul Falasifa. We have discussed about this in the early sessions of Islamic worldview. And Al-Imam Ibn Rushd came to their support, and he gave a response to this critique, which he called Tahafatul Tahafut. And this is very famous. So Aristotle holds a very important place in Muslim legacy, particularly philosophy and ethics, morality, and all other fields of knowledge. And according to the claim of some scholars, this needs more research. I have read this somewhere, that there are scholars who claim that the early Greek philosophers, they took their knowledge from Luqman alayhi salam. Luqman al-Hakim, Luqman the wise, who is a very important personality in the Quran. Luqman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted him hikmah, and his words of hikmah have been narrated in our books. And we have a whole chapter in the Quran about Luqman alayhi salam, his nasihah, his words of wisdom. So they say the Luqman alayhi salam, he lived in the times of early Western antiquity, yani the Greek civilization. And these philosophers, they took their hikmah. One of the sources of their wisdom and knowledge was Luqman alayhi salam. Wallahu alam, this needs more research. Perhaps because the Muslim scholars, they disagree about the status of Luqman alayhi salam. Was he a prophet or a pious man who was granted knowledge and wisdom by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So if we accept his prophethood, which means and the claim that the Greek philosophers took their knowledge from Luqman alayhi salam, this could mean that the origin of the early wisdom of the Greek philosophers is prophetic. So this needs further research. Virtue theory is very important, and it's near to the Islamic metaethics. The main focus of virtue theory is on the question, what kind of person ought I be? And if we can summarize it in one sentence, what kind of person ought I be? According to Aristotle, human being uh, has been given qualities, intrinsic qualities, dispositions, by which if he acts according to the rational principle, yani if these dispositions and these qualities, these characteristics become subservient to the rational principle or to the aql, if we use Islamic terminology, because this aql, intellect, is the main quality which differentiates us from other realms of existence, particularly animals. So when these natural dispositions, qualities, characteristics, they become subservient to the rational principle, a human being in that state achieves eudaimonia. He calls it that. This is a, I think, Greek word, eudaimonia, human prosperity. He achieves the purpose for which he has been created. However, these qualities which have been created in a human being can lead to evil also if they are not tamed. If a human being does not reach the golden mean balance in these qualities, yani the desires, the different desires, the qualities, characteristics, in itself they are good. However, they can become evil if we don't understand how to apply them in a balanced manner. And this is known as Aristotle's famous doctrine of the mean, golden mean. So Allah has created, in Islamic perspective, we don't know, did Greek philosophers believe in God or not? What was the role of religion in their understanding and wisdom? This is a very different topic which needs more research. But from Islamic perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created these qualities in us, which are important for us. That's why they have been created. And we cannot kill these qualities. These qualities define us as human beings. So sexual desire, in itself, it is good because it guarantees the human existence. However, it becomes evil if it transgresses the limits, if we don't know how to apply it properly. And according to Aristotle, if we don't make it subservient to the rational principle. So this idea of eudaimonia, human prosperity, is very important in Aristotelian ethics or virtue theory. He called it human prosperity. So according to him, the prosperity or happiness of anything lies in doing for what it has been created. So for example, if we say, and this is how we define the morality or the goodness and evilness of anything. So if we say, this is a good knife. Now, good knife means a knife which cuts properly, right? A knife which is sharp. What is the purpose of knife? The purpose of knife is to cut the objects. Now, this is the purpose of knife. So goodness of a thing lies in fulfilling the purpose for which it has been created. The purpose of knife is to cut. Now, if it cannot fulfill its purpose, it is not a good knife. Now, this goodness and knife are not two separate entities. We don't say good is different from knife. Good knife, because when we define a knife, we have to define its purpose. Same applies on human beings. A good human being is a person who fulfills his purpose. And what is the purpose? In morality, moral construct. The purpose is to achieve golden mean in these dispositions which have been created in a human being. Now, this is exactly what our scholars do and explain when they discuss ethics, whether it's Al-Imam al-Iji or Al-Imam al-Ghazali and others. They talk about these qualities and how to achieve balance in these qualities, how to make these qualities subservient to the aql. Aql should not become subservient to these qualities or desires. And they also discuss about the main characteristics in a human being and its branches, which we saw in the text of Thabit ibn Sinan also, the three main qualities. Now, this concept can be called education of desire. How do we achieve eudaimonia or human prosperity, happiness? And we call this human being who has achieved eudaimonia a good human being, a moral human being, or who has been elevated to the highest moral hierarchy. We achieve it by education of desire. And we have to train ourselves. And this training is the ultimate purpose of moral philosophy according to Aristotle. So virtue is fundamentally a matter of having the right desires towards the right objects and in the right degree. If we ask Aristotle about the meaning of virtue, he will say virtue is having the right desire towards the right objects and in the right degree. And this is the golden mean which a human being must achieve. Virtuous deeds must be second nature. So it is not only about action. And we saw in some Western moral theories which are more focused on action or the response of a human being in certain situations or the mutual benefit. So according to Aristotle, it is not about how we behave or how we act in a particular situation, how beneficial our action is for the other and his action for us. It is not about only actions in certain situations. It's about cultivating these traits and characteristics and turning them into permanent qualities, which he calls second nature. So virtuous deeds must become second nature. How will they become second nature? By education of desire, by training ourselves. And this is the definition of akhlaq, which we discussed in the beginning. Khuluq is which becomes second nature. Bila rawiyya wala ikhtiyar. Yani it flows naturally. We don't have to give effort. So if you are giving effort to do something and your nafs is in difficulty and hardship, this action has not become your khuluq. They took it from Aristotle. So the real question for virtue theory is not what ought I to do, but rather what dispositions should I acquire. This is the main difference. So in other theories, they focus on what ought I to do generally or in particular situations. So they are more action-based theories. Here, the focus is what dispositions should I acquire? Because what ought I to do will flow naturally after that. Now, if you acquire the disposition of generosity, which means if you achieve golden mean in generosity, kindness, helping people will naturally flow after that. So you don't have to think about what ought I to do in particular situations, but rather which qualities and dispositions should I acquire and how should I achieve the golden mean in them. Now, in comparison, as we have seen, there are moral theories of the Western philosophers which mainly focus on the what they call participant attitudes, reactive attitudes. These reactive attitudes are based on how we react to the behavior of people. The participant attitudes or participant reactive attitudes like resentment, gratitude, forgiveness, and so on provide the justification for holding individuals morally responsible. Now, in these participant attitudes, reactive attitudes, and I resent someone, I forgive someone based on his behavior, right? So I would not have this attitude if the second person was not involved. Someone did bad to me, because a random person on the street, I don't have any moral attitude towards him. I don't know him. I have never spoken with him. He has not, we have not mutually shared anything. So I will not have any reactive attitude towards him. But a person who harms me, a person who tries to create difficulty for me, speaks bad about me, I will surely have the attitude of resentment towards him, right? So these are called person-based responses or participant attitudes. Now, in this discussion, they talk about the moral intuitions. Do moral intuitions exist? Is morality based on principles only, and we have a set of principles, and we try to follow these principles? Or as human beings, we don't only follow principles, but we have intuitions, we have emotions, we react to some situations. How can we, to what extent can we involve in moral intuitions and reactive participant attitudes in the discussion of morality? Because all our reactions may not be good and also not evil. They may not be anything, because as human beings, we are exposed to all types of emotional situations. Sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I'm feeling bad, sometimes I'm overthinking about something, so on and so forth. So in that situation, if I react to something, if I react to someone, to what extent can we involve these reactions or the intuitions, the emotions behind my reaction in the discussion of morality? Should we involve them, or should we clearly discard them and only involve the discussion of principles in good and evil? Questions will be taken at the end, because if we start discussions, I will not be able to complete, and my flow of involvement will be hampered. So let's wait. We'll take questions. We'll discuss, inshallah, at the end. Okay. So participant attitudes, person-based responses, and the reasons behind our actions. Can we consider these reasons causes? Is every reason a cause? And this is a very important debate in the philosophy of mind. Because by cause, we mean a tangible and a substantial cause, which can be used and accepted in the discussion of morality, of understanding a good action and differentiating it from a bad action. What is the reason of your resentment? What is the cause of your mercy? What is the reason of your particular behavior towards a particular human being? Now, can reasons be considered causes? Because we have all types of reasons for our behavior. Some reasons are not just justifiable. Some reasons we may not accept it as a cause. We may say, I was not in my mind when I reacted. So this is a discussion in in some Western moral theories. So as I said, here we have a separation between action-based moral theory and virtue-based theories. So the Aristotelian virtue theory is virtue-based. It's about acquiring the dispositions. And the others are action-based. The main deficiency of purely action-based theories, give me a moment. Why is this person disturbing us? Alas, I have removed him. I don't know why. Who is this person trying to disturb? I have removed him, raising his hand again and again, trying to ask questions. Wallahu alam. People even lack basic etiquettes and understanding. The main deficiency of purely action-based theories is that they have nothing to say about the moral dimensions of motives. This is the main problem. Action-based theories only talk about how you react to a particular situation. What ought I to do with this particular person in this particular situation? What about the motives? What about the intentions and the motives behind my action? Purely action-based theories have nothing to offer there. Motives are also important in moral philosophy. Motives. Motives are often what gives our actions their moral complexion. The actions are given their moral nature by the motives. Motives are born from our characters. So action-based theories, they don't offer anything in understanding the motives. And if I did this, what was my motive? And motives can affect the quality of the action or the moral nature of the action. Now, if I helped someone out of mercy and compassion, this is a moral action. Its morality is reserved. But if I am helping this person because I have a nefarious motive behind it, I have some motive, I want to use this person, now the same action will not be morally justified, right? No, for example, if I'm giving someone money because he's poor, and out of kindness, I want to help this person genuinely, this is a moral action. But if I'm giving him money in order to use him later on for some purpose, or to exploit his condition. So this is immoral. The action is same. You can see the action is same. The action is giving money to a poor person who needs it. But motive can change the dimension of this action. So motives are important. And the purely action-based theories, they don't offer anything in understanding the motives. Then we also have this problem with action-based theories, that they don't provide us any guidance in understanding the unity of virtues and the conflict between them. And this is also used as a critique of the virtue theory. Unity of virtues and conflict between them. So a particular virtue, which is based on the disposition which I have acquired, I have educated my desire, I have achieved balance, can conflict with another virtue. Take the case of terrorism, for example, which is used as a scapegoat in our times. So, for example, if we have a genuine case of terrorism, and a person tries to kill some people in a very courageous act. He enters into the parliament or somewhere, and he knows that he will be killed there, but he enters and he does an act of terrorism, for example. Okay. Now, this needs courage. The act itself is wrong. Now, we will not go into the discussion of state-sponsored terrorism, because terrorism is used, terrorism as a term, as a construct, has been used now and is used by the despotic states to justify their actions and to go after their enemies. Israel is the best example of that. No one talks about state-sponsored terrorism. But khair, what they declare as a terrorist, his act is wrong, morally bad, but what about the courage? He's not a normal guy. He's not a normal human being. Other person may not be able to do the same act. Why? Because he has courage. Now, courage is a virtue. Courage is a moral principle. Now, what should we declare this act? This act is an act of courageous terrorism. So do we acknowledge the virtue part of this act and reject the consequence? Because the consequence of this act was wrong. So this was one example. In daily life also, we have this conflict, unity and conflict between virtues. We can at a particular situation, in a particular situation, we may apply multiple virtues. And in some situations, they may conflict. We may have to choose between virtues. So sometimes, and the scholars, Muslim scholars, they apply this in different fields of knowledge. They apply this in law, they apply this in morality, action. The concept of ahwanul baliyatayn. When we have choice between two evils, we don't have choice between good and evil. When you have a choice between genuine good and evil, of course, we take the good. But when we have a choice between evil and evil, what should we do? We take the lesser evil. It is evil. We have to engage in evil. We cannot avoid that. If we don't engage in this lesser evil, we may fall into greater evil. So, unity of virtues and the conflict between them. This has been used as a critique of virtue theory. And virtue theory does not guide us in this aspect. As I have said before also, many times, the Western philosophers, the Western thinkers, and generally the Western civilization has been very successful in theorizing and introspecting. By theorizing, I mean, I don't only mean producing theories for different fields of human life, but also introspecting, critique an-naqd. So this is against stagnation. The theory which they give, they regularly revise it, revisit it, advance. Revising does not mean rejecting it. They don't reject it. Revising means introspecting, cleaning it from impurities, explaining different aspects of it, rejecting the weaker aspects and applying the stronger aspects, so on and so forth. They have been very successful in this. So now, this is a very genuine critique of virtue theory. Unless the proponents of Aristotelian virtue theory, they have a detailed explanation of how to achieve balance when we have conflict between virtues, this theory cannot be applied. If you don't have any answer to what should I do when different virtues are in conflict, when I have to engage in evil to reach a greater good, or I have to engage in evil to avoid a greater evil. So both virtue and vice will be involved, both good and evil will be involved. Unless virtue theory has detailed explanation and solution to this question, it cannot be considered a meta theory. This is the point. Another important discussion, and which is the last, inshallah, and then we will move to another important moral philosopher, and Imam Ibn Miskawayh. We will discuss about his ideas briefly, and we will conclude this component, inshallah. Another important question is, to what extent is ethical thinking an intellectual operation? This is a very important question, which has relevance in post-modernity. Post-modernity is the dominant philosophy of the West now. It has relevance now. To what extent is ethical thinking an intellectual operation? Is ethical thinking an intellectual operation? Intellectual operation. This is a very important question. To what extent is intellect involved in ethical thinking? To what extent is morality based on rationality? And if this action is good, because it can be rationally justified. Now, this takes us to the question of ideology. Isn't ideology of a human being involved in his moral decisions? And ideology may not be always based on rationality. Ideology is developed based on the belief system of a human being, based on the family background, the society. The ideology of all ideologies cannot be justified rationally. And in fact, all ideologies are not rational. Some ideologies which have been turned into religions also are based on myth. They're based on their cultural manifestations of that society. So the question of ideology is important here. To what extent can ethical thinking be based on reason? And if we do an action, if it is reasonable, if it is justified. This is not the case always in ethical thinking. We may do some actions which are not justified by reason, like in warfare, for example, killing a human being and getting killed cannot be easily justified by reason. Reason gives us, or our instincts, they push us to survival. Protecting my life first is important. So if I'm giving my life for my country, for example, for a higher value, higher principle, and in Islam for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make the word of Allah supreme, so I am avoiding reason for a principle which may not be always justified by rationality. So ideology is involved. That's why we have, there is no doubt that reasoning, aql is always involved in taking our decisions. But what we are asking here is ethical thinking only an intellectual operation, or other faculties or other considerations are also involved, like the motives, the intentions, the intuitions, the religion, ideology? So the answer to this is no. Ethical thinking is not only an intellectual operation. Intellect is involved, no doubt. Reasoning is involved, but there are other factors. And this is the key to reaching the comprehensive moral theory, or comprehensive meta theory, which takes into consideration all these aspects: religion, motives, intuitions, nature of a human being, natural dispositions, qualities, intellect, actions in particular situations, so on and so forth, and creates a balanced moral theory for a human being, which, according to our claim, West cannot do, because main constituents are missing. Religion is missing. The nafs of a human being is not acknowledged. Psychology, modern psychology, does not believe in the soul per se. And this is a dilemma. I'm not a psychologist, but this is a dilemma, that you are discussing about the inner aspects of a human being, and you don't believe in a substantial inner core of a human being, which is the soul. So this is a problem. Now, there are many critiques of reason itself, and they are anti-reason. They say reasoning was always used as a tool by dominant ideologies. Reason does not exist. The typical case of this is feminism. Feminism. The dominant feminist movements, they believed that reason, principles, and objectivity was always masculine, and it boosted male power. And in history, stress on reason, principles, objectivity, and certain moral actions which are masculine in nature. So this was used as a tool. Reason was used as a tool. Pure reason does not exist. It was used as a tool against feminine gender, against woman. So there are critiques of reason itself, which means we can never achieve a view of human flourishing. Again, the idea of eudaimonia, human flourishing, human prosperity, which is creating a balanced human being morally. We can never achieve a view of human flourishing or justice that is free from ideology. And this is the claim. So what we claim as reasonable, based on aql, intellectual, in common words, when we ask people for their claims, when they claim something, we say, this is illogical. This is unreasonable. So according to this claim, reason is only a tool for ideologies. So basically, these movements, which were anti-reason, they discussed, or they talked about the Eurocentric nature of the objective truth, reason, and value. So basically, the Western Renaissance from the 16th to the 18th century, or maybe 19th centuries, it focused on the importance of reason, akal, rationality, against the superstition, religion, and as I said, the only religious experience available to them was Christianity. And after this, when the West reached the age of modernity and post-modernity, particularly this is post-modernity, they became these in the post modernity ideologies and movements, they became anti-reason. So they talked about Eurocentric notions of objective truth, reason, and value. So they said objective truth, reason, and value, they are not objective. We don't have anything, any truth which is objective or reason. Basically, these are all Eurocentric ideas, and they were inherently linked to colonial oppression. These ideas, they created these ideas of objective truth, reason, the scientific fact, all these words, objective facts. They use this to rule people. So they are Eurocentric notions of objective truth, reason, and value are inherently linked to colonial oppression, to control people. So objective facts and generalizations are the expressions and tools of domination. Objective facts, and we hear these words. This is a fact. You cannot reject it, right? This is a scientific fact. So objective facts and generalizations are the expression. Generalization means principle. Now, this is a principle, you cannot go against it. This is a general rule, are the expressions and tools of domination. So do we have something which we can call rational morality? Rational morality. In which morality is purely based on akal. This is a question which has been discussed. It needs further research. However, we can safely say that in order to create a meta-ethical theory which benefits human beings, we must take all these constituents into consideration and club them together in a balanced manner. And in my opinion, this is impossible for a human being to do. How genius he is, how philosophical his thinking is, it is impossible. Because our knowledge is limited. This is the point. So the knowledge of motives, the knowledge of intuitions, the knowledge of the inner self, this is limited. So this theory, in this manner, a balanced meta-ethical theory, which benefits human beings, in which all these constituents are taken into consideration, the actions, the reactive attitudes, the rationality, motives, the secrets of the inner self can only come from Allah and God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another discussion which happens here in understanding the rational morality, or can morality be based on rationality, is the mas'ala of consent. Now, this is another problem. Consent changes the nature of a moral act. So, for example, killing a human being is considered immoral because life in itself is good. In principle, it is good. And taking the life of a human being is considered immoral across the spectrum, in all religions, in all, even in atheistic worldviews. But if a human being gives consent to be killed, like in this, the mercy killing or whatever it's called, now it is considered legal in many Western countries. A person is giving consent to die. Now, this consent changes, according to them, changes the moral nature of this act. Now, what about the motive? What about the intrinsic nature of this act, which means there is no intrinsic morality. Killing is good if it is done without consent. Now, these are two important examples. Number one, value of human life. So human life, its value is based on the consent. Human life can be taken if there is consent, which means there is no intrinsic value to human life. It's based on consent. Now, what is the consent based on? This is another discussion. And a person's consent is his decision, isn't it? And his decision may be wrong. His decision may be based on poor knowledge or wrong consideration. Another example is sexual morality. Again, the idea of consent. The sexual activity is considered immoral if without consent. But if with consent, after a certain age, it is perfectly fine. So if consent can change the nature of an act from good to evil, from moral to immoral, what about rationality? What about the motives? What about the virtue theory? What about the intrinsic virtues which are in the actions? This all comes into jeopardy, isn't it? So these are the discussions and the overall atmosphere, intellectual atmosphere of the West. And we can see deficiency, weakness, problem, in spite of the fact that the human knowledge, whoever nurtures it, produces it, whether it's in the West or the East, it is beneficial. We can benefit from it. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the famous hadith, Al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min. The wisdom is lost treasure of a believer. Wherever he finds it, فَهُوَ أَحَقُّ بِهَا. He deserves it more because our Deen, our religion, is the Deen of wisdom, knowledge. But we can see the deficiency. That's why the scholars, they say in the science of logic, بِالضِّدِّ تَتَّضِحُ الْأَشْيَاءُ. By comparison, things become more clear. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding of these matters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us confidence in our own legacy and help us to approach the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a more comprehensive manner. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate our intellectual capabilities. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate the ummah intellectually and practically. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by his beautiful names and exalted attributes, forgive our sins and mistakes and shortcomings in these sessions. We are speaking on his behalf. We are speaking about his deen. We may have shortcomings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overlook those shortcomings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our sins, elevate the ranks of our dead, make their graves gardens of paradise. Accept our martyrs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant nusrah to the mujahideen in Palestine, in Kashmir, in all occupied territories. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us and give us tawfiq of doing our part, contributing according to our capabilities in the upliftment of the ummah. Because this should be the primary concern. We do according to our capabilities. It may be even making a dua. It may be teaching a child. But we should always keep this bigger principle in mind. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ لَمْ يَغْزُوا وَلَمْ يُحَدِّثْ نَفْسَهُ بِالْغَزْوِ مَاتَ عَلَى شُعْبَةٍ مِّنْ شُعَبِ النِّفَاقِ. Whoever does not go in the path of Allah, does not fight in the path of Allah, and this thought even does not come to him, he dies on a branch of hypocrisy. Fighting in the path is for what? To make the word of Allah supreme. So as Muslims, this idea of making the word of Allah supreme, making Islam dominant in our societies, nurturing the Muslim civilization according to our capabilities, should always be in our mind. Al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, enjoining good, forbidding evil, should always be our priority. However, according to our capabilities and understanding the intricacies of these projects, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept us. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala nabi ummi. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.